Everybody, or good morning, good afternoon, or maybe even evening, depending on where you're actually coming in from. Welcome. My name is Ian Manasco. I'm the Director of Demand Generation for SafeBreach. I will be your moderator today for our presentation, Improving SOC Effectiveness with MITRE Attack and Threat Intelligence. We have a very impactful agenda today, so let me walk through it. Next slide, KJ. Oh, got it. So walking us through the agenda. So first and foremost, we're going to talk a little bit about enterprise security is complex and walk through exactly what that means and the impact as far as the organization and what that means from a security standpoint. Understanding MITRE Attack and benefits and challenges. We'll also go through how SafeBreach helps operationalize MITRE Attack and why threat intelligence can be a double-edged sword. And also bring your own intelligence, BYOI, with SafeBreach. And we'll walk you through exactly what all of that means. We'll give you a really good, impactful, and deep demo as far as the product and the solution are concerned. And at the very end, we have plenty of time for Q&A, and we'll be taking in all of your various different questions. So please have those at the ready. I want to walk us through our presenters today. Next slide, KJ. So first and foremost, we have Shira Akov, is a SafeBreach product manager. Shira has been a product manager with SafeBreach for the past 3 years and has over 7 years of experience within the world of cybersecurity. We also have Kostab Jagtap, also known as KJ, is SafeBreach's senior product marketing manager with over 12 years of technology marketing experience. He is a telecom engineer by education, but has always been passionate about cybersecurity. He loves distilling difficult technical ideas and concepts into easy to understand languages. Welcome, Shira, and welcome, KJ.
Thank you so much, Ian, for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, for wherever you're joining. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. So now that you guys are here, you're here for a common cause. You're joining a cybersecurity company's webinar. You obviously understand that cybersecurity is very complicated, obviously, with enterprises on an average deploying nearly 75 cybersecurity related tools in their network. So security teams in your organization obviously need a simple and proactive approach to measure cyber risk and maintain a hardened security posture. Typically, they do that using threat intelligence powered attack frameworks that allow security teams to simplify this, speak a common language. And most of you may have heard of a framework called MITRE or a framework called nist. But it's also important to realize that you cannot just go ahead and blindly operationalize these attack frameworks to try and reduce risk without understanding the intricacies of each framework, because each organization, each enterprise's needs vary, their priorities vary. So you need to understand where an attack framework might fit in, or how should I correctly operationalize it in order for me to be successful in my goal or whatever my priorities are. So let's go ahead and look and see, how MITRE can essentially help you. So basically, what is MITRE? Yeah, let me just start there. MITRE basically stands for MITRE Adversarial Tactics, Techniques, and Common Knowledge, or ATT&CK. The MITRE attack framework is essentially a globally accessible knowledge base of adversary tactics and techniques based on real-world observations. So companies all around the world, researchers all around the world, when they discover something, they contribute to this attack framework that can then be essentially shared with everybody who uses the MITRE attack framework. It's primarily used, obviously, for attack gathering and disseminating threat intelligence, threat detection and analysis, obviously, because that's what threat intelligence is. Understanding adversary behavior so that you can understand the scope of attack and see what they could potentially do, and basically identifying and fixing those security gaps that before an attacker can actually take advantage of them. But most importantly, as I mentioned before, it essentially provides every single security team or every single security personnel in your SOC a common language to compare and understand the organizational security posture in terms of a common framework. That's essentially the goal of MITRE ATT&CK. But so if MITRE ATT&CK is so magical, and if it's like everybody knows about it, everybody must be using it. Is that true? Well, 82. These stats are actually from a MITRE threat informed survey, and the respondents that were interviewed, 82% of them did know what MITRE ATT&CK was, but only 8% of them were using it regularly. Now, is that sounds pretty low, and it is an alarming tactic. But why is that? Because if you remember, if I'd mentioned before, cyber attack frameworks, they can be very complicated to operationalize, and they have to be customized to each enterprise or each organization's individual risk tolerance. But it's also important to understand that out of the box, the MITRE ATT&CK framework is too broad. You can't just take it and plug it somewhere and expect magic out of it. Not every organization might be focused on the threats or the threat actors or the tactics or techniques listed in it, might have that on their radar, or that might be their priority. It is very difficult to automate without automation, because what are you going to do with all this information? You have to take it, plug it somewhere, and in order for you to reduce that time to detect and time to respond, you have to automate these processes. You cannot just manually take this information and hope that your analysts are able to fix it. That's just not how it's going to work. But here's the thing. Even if you have all of that in place, not every security tool that you own may actually be able to support this or support some of the newer tactics and techniques. So that's why it's critical to understand that MITRE out of the box may not be for everyone, but you have to basically take pieces of it, customize it, and understand what fits your risk tolerance and how can you best use that. So obviously we are in a SafeReach webinar, so let me help you kind of walk through or help you understand how SafeReach can essentially help organizations successfully leverage this MITRE ATT&CK framework. Basically, SafeReach has this massive attacker playbook called our Hackers Playbook. It's the largest in the industry for any BAS vendor. We basically automatically and safely execute thousands of attack methods that can essentially validate your security posture by checking or validating your network, your endpoint, your cloud, container, or email security controls, and testing them if they can actually withstand these attacks. These are, again, as I mentioned, these are real-world attacks that are safely executed to understand how your controls are performing. Now, this attacker's playbook or this hacker's playbook is continuously updated by leveraging the ATT&CK framework. So any new tactics and techniques that are globally contributed to this framework automatically are added to our Hackers Playbook, as well as our own research team basically goes ahead and updates these every time a brand new threat or a threat of importance or something critical kind of comes in. So the results of these simulations, once you run these simulated attacks, you can summarize the results on our MITRE ATT&CK board. This attack board essentially will look familiar, because if you've ever looked at the MITRE ATT&CK enterprise matrix, this is intended to basically mimic that look. But the difference part is that these attacks are summarized, but you can actually filter them by tactic, technique, sub-techniques, threat actor, or specific threat. This allows the security personnel to really focus on those threats that matter to them, that they can actually use, rather than just being, everything just goes and let me try and see what is the worst thing. No, if there are threats that matter to you, focus on those threats, and you can easily do that by, as you can see, you can filter information here. So how easy is it to actually, go ahead and operationalize it in SafeReach? So as I mentioned, we have a massive Hackers Playbook or attack playbook that has over 23,000 attacks. And so that number might seem overwhelming as what do I focus on? But if you have decided to focus and leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you can again go on and filter them by the tactic, technique, sub-technique, whatever you're looking for. Or if there is a particular stage in the attack kill chain, as MITRE defines tactics as, you can go ahead and filter it by them and then narrow down your search so that you can choose these attacks. Now, if you feel that this is all too much, we also have a simpler way for you, which is SafeBreach scenarios. These essentially are pre-built tests that we continuously update. These can provide you essentially as you can see here, an easy way for you to access all those attack kill chains or those real world scenarios. If an attacker was to use something like this, if they were to attack our cloud controls, what would they do? Or if they were to attack our containers, what would they do? Or if I want to just run a complete baseline on my organization. So you can easily either use and search our playbook for specific attacks, or you can leverage our scenarios. So that's one. There are a couple of easy ways you can really do it. So, I know I've been kind of going on at this about MITRE, but if you remember, one of the key things that I had mentioned was of MITRE, the benefits or the key primary uses of MITRE attack framework is essentially to provide quality threat intelligence that can help speed up threat detection and response, as well as identify and fix gaps before an attacker can take advantage of them. So obviously, as you can see, threat intelligence is a key deliverable of the MITRE attack framework because it's a repository. And threat intelligence is a very critical component to measure and maintain the health or effectiveness of a SOC. Everyone from the CISO, they obviously get asked, you've received this threat intelligence, how are we protected against them? The threat intelligence and hunting team, they are proactively looking for gaps in their organization based on any new intelligence that they might receive. The SOC team overall is looking to plug all the gaps in the security controls. The vulnerability management team is looking at any new CVEs that might be available. How can we fix and plug our gaps? So everyone in the security organization is focused on threat intelligence. This threat intelligence needs to be contextual because it needs to provide that additional information. It needs to be timely so that they can make rapid detections and quickly remediate those gaps that get identified. But threat intelligence, comes in all shapes and sizes. It's not created equal. If you improperly operationalize threat intelligence, it's like a tap. If you open it like all the way out, everything's going to come and you're not going to know what to really focus on. So it is important to understand that while threat intelligence is a very valuable tool, you need to be able to find what is it that you need to focus on, or what is it that your organization really cares about. And if you don't do that, what happens? Because every organization's need varies, bad threat intelligence, or incorrectly operationalized threat intelligence. What I mean by incorrectly operationalized is essentially opening the tap to the entire way out and expecting magical threat IOCs to kind of come your way. That essentially will lead to a lot of noise, and it can lead to alert fatigue. Obviously, everyone's heard about alert fatigue because it is a very real thing. It can cause threat detections to be missed, or the accuracy of the threat detections to be reduced because there's no context available. Security teams in the entire SOC may not know the scope of the attack, so the left hand might not know what the right hand is doing. And all of this essentially is going to cause a potential threat to slip through the gaps and screw over the entire organization. And that is something you don't want. You don't want those missed detections. So where does SafeBreach kind of come into all of this? SafeBreach essentially is the only breach and attack simulation or BAS provider that provides you the opportunity, or not opportunity, the capability to personalize attacks based on the threat intelligence that you trust. So if there is a threat intelligence provider, or if there's a threat intelligence platform that you trust, you can essentially leverage that and create custom attacks based on the priorities that your organization likes to focus on. This allows security teams and security personnel to run those attacks and essentially understand what is my risk exposure across my entire organization. You're not just looking at one or two things. Because we are able to run attacks across your entire security infrastructure, across your security controls on-prem as well as in the cloud, you can essentially gain that additional context of what is my whole enterprise-wide risk. You can easily identify what your gaps are And you can easily convey those gaps to the correct security teams once you've identified those, so that you can quickly reduce your detection time as well as response time. Now, I've kind of talked a bunch about all the capabilities that we have. The two ones that I highlighted, the MITRE attack framework, operationalizing it, and personalizing threat intelligence based on your personalizing attacks based on your own threat intelligence. They're just two of the many capabilities that are offered by our platform. The SafeBreach platform essentially, its goal is to unify people, processes, and technologies. What I mean by that is, just like the MITRE attack framework is intended to have the security personnel speak a common language, the entire goal of SafeBreach is to not have these silos. You're able to detect enterprise-wide threats because you're able to test all the security controls, and you're able to bring all of these teams together with a common goal of identifying and fixing those gaps. And as you can see in this image, each of these higher level areas, so all of these are higher level areas that potentially are individual teams, we integrate, they're managed by individual teams, and SafeBreach integrates with a wide variety of security controls, vulnerability management tools, threat intelligence providers that I just mentioned, automation and orchestration tools to provide that holistic view. I know holistic, the word is widely used and it's like, beaten to death, but we do actually provide a very high level view that provides you visibility into your gaps so that you can look at that and then start diving down. We can allow you to understand and measure your security risk and your overall security posture, and the main thing is make those informed decisions that will help you secure your enterprise. And again, these are this is an entire comprehensive list of all the use cases that we support. Obviously, security control validation, threat assessment, cloud assessment, risk-based vulnerability management. There's also mergers and acquisitions. But the ones identified in green are the ones that we kind of talked about. So as you can see, it is a versatile, multifaceted tool that can help you pinpoint overall help as well as any specific use cases that you might be interested in. Now, I'm going to hand it off to Shira, who can walk us through how security teams can successfully leverage the MITRE attack framework and personalized threat intelligence to reduce the mean time to detect and mean time to respond, and give you like an overall overview of the platform. Over to you, Shira.
Great, thanks, KJ. Thanks, Ian. So yeah, I'd be happy to share my screen and go over a quick demo with everyone. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. Yeah, so as KJ mentioned, SafeBreach does make MITRE available across many parts of the platform. I'll start out by kind of highlighting how the platform is built. So we start out with our attack capabilities, which is really around identifying and exploring what we actually want to run in the environment. After that, we have the option to analyze the results. So after the tests are run, after we have our simulation results, we can understand what those results are trying to tell us about our security posture. The next step is remediation. So being able to take those insights and turn them into actionable remediation steps that we can use to improve our security posture and improve our hygiene. And lastly, we have the reporting section, which allows us to display information regarding our current security posture, as well as tracking improvements over time, and being able to share that with additional stakeholders within the organization. So if we kind of start using that framework, let's start with the world of attacks. So as KJ mentioned before, this is our Hacker's Playbook. It's a very, very large library repository of many types of attacks across various vectors. It's the largest library among all the BAS vendors. We also have an SLA of 24 hours. So anytime there are new threats and new attacks that are coming out, our research team is on top of it, and they add those threats very, very quickly so that they can be available for our customers. And there's also a lot of independent research going on by our SafeBreach Labs team. So this repository, this knowledge base is constantly being updated with more attacks. So as we mentioned before, MITRE tactics, MITRE techniques, MITRE threat groups, these are all different fields that you can use in order to narrow down the subset of attacks that you would be interested in running. As we mentioned, there are 5,600 different types of attacks, which translate into over 23,000 breach methods. So that can be a pretty overwhelming number. So MITRE is one of the ways that you can focus your efforts on a particular subset of attacks that you would want to run and continue from there. So for example, we can focus on one particular tactic and we'll only be seeing the relevant attacks for that tactic. We have support for tactics as well as techniques, threat groups, software that's being used by threat groups that are tracked by MITRE. So those are all options for narrowing down and exploring the different types of attacks that we support. Additionally, we do have SafeBreach scenarios. So as KJ showed quickly before, these are kind of attack stories that are pre-built. They're templates that you can use. You can customize them, make whatever changes you would like to make, and then run them in your environment. So once you do find the scenario that matches the use case that you would be interested in testing in your environment, it's very, very easy to simply configure the relevant simulators, which represent the relevant segments in your environment that you would want to test, and then easily run that test on those particular segments in your environment. This can be run on demand or it can be run continuously, and that way you can also track it over time. So in the context of MITRE specifically, we have threat groups, a lot of which are threat groups that are tracked by MITRE, APT29, APT16, etc. And we also have scenarios that correspond to matrices that are built by the MITRE ATT&CK enterprise framework. So each one is based on kind of a different aspect. So there's one scenario that's focused on cloud and one scenario that's focused on containers. These scenarios are also constantly being updated. So we're constantly widening the range of scenarios and use cases that are supported here as part of the scenarios page. So that's kind of within the world of attacking. Once the simulations have actually been carried out and the results are available for analysis, this is also another place where MITRE is available as a tool. The MITRE ATT&CK heat map that KJ showed a little bit earlier, this is a really great way to kind of hone in and focus your remediation efforts on the areas that will have the largest impact on improving your security posture. So again, this is built in the same manner as the MITRE ATT&CK navigator, based on the same tactics and same techniques. And this allows us to kind of, based on the heat map that we can see here, based on the different colors, we can focus on the various techniques for which the prevention scores are higher and where we would want to focus our efforts first to make sure that we know that we're making a big impact on improving our posture and that we're not spending too much time on things that aren't actually posing a very big risk to our environment. So that's in terms of the analysis and what can be done. I'll also note that this can be exported as a layer so that it can also be imported into the MITRE ATT&CK's actual navigator. So that's also a useful tool. Lastly, MITRE is also, of course, available within our reporting module. So we support flexible dashboards. We do have dashboards that are out of the box, but it also is possible to create your own dashboards and create your own widgets. For example, here, if we focus on threat assessment, we can see that we have out-of-the-box widgets that show the top MITRE techniques that weren't blocked. Again, the idea here is being able to focus on the specific techniques where we see that our security controls aren't performing as expected or performing less than we would hope them to. And in this case, we would understand what needs to be done and what configuration changes need to be done in order to make sure that we're improving the coverage for those particular techniques. The idea here is to constantly improve. So of course, you can always rerun a specific test that was run after you make any configuration changes and see how your posture is improving over time. Here as well, we can see a status breakdown by MITRE tactic. When you display the widgets visually like this, it's very easy to focus on the things that really require your attention. So here, for example, we can see that execution and privilege escalation and persistence, these are the tactics that we would want to focus on more, because we see that here there's a larger proportion of NIST simulations compared to tactics such as command and control or exfiltration, where we see that our prevention status and our prevention risk is much lower. So this is an example. We can also filter in the first place. So we do provide filters here. So you can also, kind of like what I mentioned in the attacks playbook, you can also filter according to a specific subset. So if you wish to only focus on simulations that are correlated to a particular MITRE technique or tactic, you can also do that here and see all of these widgets populated by that particular subset of simulation results. So that's also one of the ways. So those are kind of places where MITRE comes into play within our platform. One of the other things that KJ was talking about previously was operationalizing MITRE. So kind of different ways and best practices that we often see our users using when trying to implement MITRE within their environment. So there are several different options. One example could be users that are interested in particular MITRE components. For example, if I have an organization where the CISO is really focused on focusing on a specific stage of the kill chain. So for example, a CISO wants to focus on the early stages. He wants to make sure that the perimeter can't be breached and that attackers can't gain a foothold. In this case, they would run whatever attacks they find to be interesting. They would probably be infiltration attacks. And in this case, they can really go to the MITRE attack board and look at the relevant tactics. So in this case, we would see that if they're looking at initial access, in this case, they're actually doing pretty well in terms of preventing various attacks that are mapped to this particular tactic. So that can be one example of how MITRE can be used when operationalizing SafeBreach. Another example is based on MITRE evaluations. So if we jump back to the playbook, I can show you. So as you all know, MITRE has released some evaluations for particular threat groups. This is something that's available here as well. So for example, ATT&CK is one of the evaluations that they released recently. We can here filter according to ATT&CK. And what we get here is a subset of 137 different attack types, which translate into 450 breach methods when you take into account the various parameter configurations. And this can very easily be run. We can select whether we want to run it on all the simulators that we have configured or only on some that represent specific segments of our environment, as I mentioned. And once that's run, once a test such as that has been run, they can view the test summary, see aggregated data about that test that was run, follow it over time, see the correlated security controls that we're able to detect and alert on that particular subset of attacks. And they can also continue on to the MITRE Heat Map, like we mentioned before, while staying in the context of the specific test that was run. So in this case, we're not looking at all of the simulations that were run across the entire network. In this case, we're looking only at the specific ATT&CK test that we had run. And here as well, it helps us really focus on, within the context of attacks relating to ATT&CK, where do we need to focus our efforts? So in this case, it's very clear, for example, that discovery, that the tactic of discovery and techniques having to do with discovery would require addressing earlier, because a lot of these techniques have a high proportion of simulations that weren't blocked. And in this case, we would want to kind of drill in and see exactly what simulations we are talking about, understand what the different parameters were, understand what the progress of the simulation itself looked like. And as a result, we can also understand what configuration changes need to be made in order to fix that, so that the next time we rerun the simulation, we know, or this subset of simulations, we know that our security controls will do a better job of picking up on those particular simulations and triggering the relevant detections or alerts based on the rules that we configured. So that's another example of using MITRE evaluations. The third example that I wanted to mention also has to do with MITRE evaluations, but does that through threat intelligence. So this ties back to the last point that KJ discussed. So this is kind of using a threat-based approach that uses threat intelligence. SafeBreach has a threat intelligence module that allows integrating with your threat intelligence provider, the threat intelligence provider that you trust, as KJ said. As you can see here, we support a wide variety. We support other vendors as well. Here, for example, we can see that we have Unit 42, Threat Connect, and Alien Vault. So once you have that integration set up, we're able to pull the information from your threat intelligence provider, and then you can easily find the various threats that are interesting to you. And for example, if we want to focus on oil rig, we can generate attacks directly from here. So again, if we're looking here at the specific example of oil rig, we can see an overview. Again, this is all information that was pulled directly from Unit 42 in this case. We can see an overview regarding this particular threat. We can see all kinds of various classifications relevant to this threat, such as target countries, etc. And we also provide a summary of the different types of indicators. So we can see that there are 58 hashes and IPs and domains and URLs that are attributed to this threat, as well as 37 different TTPs. This is another place where MITRE comes into play, because these are all MITRE techniques. You can also drill into each, and you can read about them more in the MITRE website for each of these various techniques. And here we can see which attacks we expect to generate for this particular threat. So if you decide that this is a threat that's interesting for your environment, you can very easily click here on generate attacks, and based on the IOCs and TTPs that we saw here, we would generate new attacks based on the IOCs and correlate any existing attacks that are relevant to this threat to this particular threat. And what this means is that in the future, after you generate these attacks become available to you within the playbook. So the newly generated attacks that are based on the IOCs are available in the playbook for running, and any existing attacks that are correlated to these based on the TTPs, they will also be, you can filter by the threat of oil rig, and these particular TTP behavioral attacks will be attributed to that as well and be run as part of that threat as well. So this is really a very easy way to identify the threats that matter most to your environment, to your company, to your organization, easily generate attacks and make them available for tests that can be run in your environment, tracked over time, etc. So that was my little bit about MITRE and threat intelligence. I'll hand it back over to you, KJ.
Ian.
To Ian.
All right, let me actually share my screen. All right.
Thank you, Shira. Thank you, KJ. We've got actually quite a few questions that have been coming in, so I am going to throw these at you. Question number one: can simulators be run in parallel?
That's actually something that we're currently working on, and it's something that we hope will be available very soon. So yes, being able to run several attacks on several simulators in parallel is something that we're currently working on. Okay.
Question number two: why would an attack not be detected, logged, or prevented, but be listed as stopped?
So the way that we define our success criteria for specific attacks is based on the input that we get from the attacker as well as from the target. So in some cases, we might hear from the target that, that they didn't get the attack, that the attack wasn't successful. Something stopped it along the way because the attack wasn't successful at reaching the target. However, we may not have any integrations in place, and therefore we wouldn't be able to detect it, or we might have integrations in place without the relevant rules that would be able to detect that particular attack. And that's another case where that particular attack might not be detected. So in those cases, we would in those cases we would log that particular simulation as stopped, because we do have an indication that the attack wasn't successful, but we don't have the relevant correlations from the relevant security controls to understand exactly which security control was able to detect it and what action was taken.
Okay. Question number 3, is it common to take more than 4 hours to run large numbers of simulators?
So it really depends on the use case. Some of our tests, and again, it's depending on the scope and the breadth of what you're trying to test. So if you are running a large amount of attacks on a large amount of simulators that represent a large number of segments in your environment, then that may take some time. It may take several hours, definitely. On the other hand, that means that you're getting a much wider scope in terms of your coverage, of the coverage of your network that you're covering and that you're monitoring. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Really coming best one. Okay. Question number 4, is MITRE ATT&CK the only cybersecurity attack framework supported by SafeBreach?
So we also support the NIST 853 framework. We don't have a heat map for that particular framework, but we do allow filtering. We do correlate specific attacks to the relevant controls within that framework as well. So that's also available if you wish to narrow down the types of attacks based on that framework. That's also available.
Okay. Next question, can I modify the built-in MITRE scenarios and customize them?
Yes, definitely. As I mentioned, the scenarios are very much customizable. What we provide as part of the scenarios are a suggestion or a template that you can build upon. You can make any changes, remove and add remove and add attacks that you're interested in. They're also organized in a sequential manner, so there's a lot of flexibility there. I'll also note that we have customization capabilities for our attacks as well. So even for an atomic attack, not just for an overall attack story or sequence, also for an atomic attack, it is possible to duplicate an existing attack and make various changes regarding the different parameters. For example, if it's IOC based, you can change hashes. So it's also very, very customizable and flexible, and that's a tool that we make available to our customers for red teaming purposes and to make sure that they can run whatever they want within their environment.
Okay, we got 2 or 3 more questions. If stopped is registered because of I think this is a follow-up to the previous question, but if stopped is registered because of a lack of result, what is the difference between stop and no result?
No result indicates that we don't have any kind of input regarding the result of the simulation that was run. Whereas stopped, as I mentioned, we do have some input because we do have information from the simulator that we know that the simulation was run, but we know that the target didn't receive what we expected it to receive in order for the simulation to be completed as we defined it. So those are 2 different things, because no results refers to the simulation not having been successful at all in running, whereas stop means that it was run, something stopped it along the way, but we don't have the relevant integration data to understand which security control detected it along the way, either because, again, there was some kind of problem with the correlation or the fetching or the rules, or because the integrations were not in place.
Okay, thank you. Two more questions. Does SafeBreach support custom breach development of breach methods using non-RFC compliant requests, such as for network protocol exploits?
Actually, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question. We can definitely follow up on that, and I can reference the research team and understand exactly what's available in terms of the customization capabilities.
Okay.
Is that okay? So
yep,
we'll definitely make sure to follow up with whoever asked that question.
Okay.
Perfect. I think that's pretty much the time we had for all our questions, but before we leave, I did want to, and I'm sharing this link via the chat right now to everybody. We have just launched our ransomware assessment challenge. Essentially, this challenge is a free assessment that our services and our sales engineering organization will run in your environment to help you understand what is your risk exposure to certain kinds of ransomware. Obviously, you'll get a detailed report, a detailed threat assessment, along with an executive report that you can share with the key stakeholders. So please do go check out the link that I've just shared in chat. And if you want to sign up, please feel free to sign up. That's all I have.
Well, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, Shira. Thank you, KJ. This has been a fantastic conversation, and hopefully everybody, as far as the audience is concerned, found this extremely informative. We welcome you to follow up on the ransomware simulation campaign, as KJ was just talking about it, as well as going to our website at safebreach.com to learn more about our products. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.